I crashed my car and ended up in the hospital while my family went on vacation without a word. Days later, my mom finally reached out to ask for money. That was the last straw. The day I totaled my car was the day I truly saw my family for who they were. I hadn't even meant to be driving that morning. My return flight from a 3-day client conference in Denver was set, but the night before, Luke called. He needed money for a cabin trip with our sisters and some friends. He pressed for urgency, claiming he'd lose the deal if he didn't book by midnight, and his card was short. He promised to pay me back by Monday. Without a second thought, I agreed to cover it. That's simply how it was with my family. They called, I always responded. The issue was, the money I transferred left me just shy of enough for my flight home the next day. So, I decided to drive through the night instead. I kept that detail to myself. There was no real reason to share. They rarely ever inquired about my life anyway. I departed Denver around midnight. The highways were treacherous, coated in a thin layer of ice from an earlier, melted snowfall. Roughly 40 minutes from my apartment, I hit black ice on a sharp curve and everything changed. A semi-truck in front of me lost control, jackknifing across the lane. I slammed the brakes, swerving hard to the left. My tires lost traction. I spun, slammed into the guardrail, then flipped. The airbag probably saved my life, but it felt as if my organs had been utterly crushed. I recall the coppery taste of blood, a deafening ring in my ears. Paramedics extracted me from the passenger side, cutting off my jacket. I asked about the truck driver, but their reply is lost to the blur before I blacked out. I awoke in a hospital bed and 4 drip in my arm, cracked ribs, a fractured wrist, and stitches. The entire right side of my body throbbed, as if beaten with a hammer. A nurse informed me I was fortunate, predicting a few more days of observation. I inquired if anyone had visited. She consulted my chart, confirming paramedics had contacted all my emergency contacts at the scene. Messages were left, yet no one had arrived. I lay there, staring at the ceiling for hours, checking my phone every few minutes. My battery dwindled to 12%. No texts, no missed calls. Then, around 9:30 a.m., my brother posted on Instagram. The photo showed him, my sisters Erin and Michelle, and my parents packed into an SUV, grinning, energy drinks in hand, as if heading to Coachella. The caption, "Road trip with the real crew." It was posted less than an hour after my accident. I reread it 3 times, obsessively checking the timestamp, hoping it was an old post that had just refreshed. It wasn't. They knew. They knew I'd been in a crash. They knew exactly where I was, and they still left. They packed up and hit the road as if I simply didn't exist. In that moment, something inside me irrevocably shifted. There were no fireworks, no outburst of rage, just a quiet snap, like a rope, stretched too taut, finally breaking. For years, I had been the family's anchor. I was the reliable fallback, the constant helper, the one footing the bill for beach rentals, college textbooks, and emergency dental procedures. 1 week, I'd cover their bills, the next a vacation. They always offered a thank you, but never once inquired about my well-being. I'd stopped expecting it. I just continued to give. Yet when I needed someone, not for money, not for assistance, but simply to be there, they weren't. They chose a cabin getaway over their brother lying in a hospital bed. I remained silent. I didn't comment on the post, nor did I message anyone. I simply lay in that bed, bruised and bandaged, letting the truth sink in. I held on to a faint hope that someone might eventually reach out. They didn't. Not that day, not the next. 4 days later, my phone finally lit up. 41 missed calls and a Venmo request for $3,100, labeled Cabin Weekend, with a note about everyone chipping in. Beneath that, a message from my mom, "Call back. It's urgent. We can't fix this without you." That was the precise moment I decided I was no longer their safety net. I haven't looked back since. I ignored it all. The Venmo request, the missed calls, and especially my mom's message. "Call back." It's urgent. We can't fix this without you. Lying in that hospital bed, ribs taped and still aching, I just stared at my phone. Her message sparked a realization, but not the one she intended. I understood she wasn't calling out of concern for me. She was calling because they had a problem. They needed me again, and their need was urgent. My accident, my days alone in the ER, none of that urgency mattered to them. The next day, when they finally discharged me, I was still limping. Asked if I had a ride. I simply said no, not even bothering to pretend I had someone to call. I ordered a ride share, let the driver chat, and remained silent, gazing out the window as the quiet stretched around me. My apartment felt unfamiliar when I entered, like a place I hadn't truly seen in years. It was clean, quiet, everything precisely as I'd left it. I sank onto the couch, still wearing my hospital wristband, and stared at the wall for 10 minutes. Every bruise, every cracked rib was palpable. Yet, the deepest ache came from the profound silence of the people I had dedicated my life to protecting. That night, I slept better than I had in years. The next morning, I created a list. Not one driven by dramatic revenge, but a simple, starkly honest accounting. In the left column, I detailed every monthly payment I made for family members. My mom's medication, my dad's share of the mortgage, Aaron's graduate school loan, Michelle's car lease, and Luke's temporary credit card debt, which I'd been covering for 19 months. This included subscription services, gym memberships, utilities, Netflix, everything. The total came to $2,780 per month, and that was just the recurring expenses. In the right column, I listed the names of everyone who had checked on me during my hospital stay. 3 names. My grandmother, who called every night since learning about the crash, my Uncle Keith, who offered to drive across state lines to pick me up, and Brian, a coworker I barely spoke to outside of meetings, who sent a voicemail offering to drop off food. No questions asked. No one else. Not my mom, my dad, my sisters, or Luke. I sat with that list for a long time. Then, I opened my banking app and began canceling one by one. I stopped every automatic transfer. I removed them from every service they didn't personally pay for. I exited shared family plans. I cut off the cable at my parents' house, canceled Michelle's gym membership, and pulled the plug on the electric bill Luke had conveniently forgotten was in my name. No messages, no warnings, no drama. That same afternoon, Luke messaged again. He claimed the cabin trip had run a bit over budget and assumed I'd simply missed the Venmo request. He included a laughing emoji, treating it like a casual inside joke between us. He added that he'd appreciate the payment soon, just so everyone's even. I left his message unread. Later, Michelle called. I ignored it. Then Aaron, then my mom, then my dad. 10 missed calls by dinner. The following morning, my mom texted, "What's going on? You know, we've always been there for each other." I stared at her message, and a feeling I hadn't allowed myself in years finally surfaced. Clarity. They genuinely believed that. They truly thought our dynamic was balanced, that my constant firefighting while they effortlessly sailed through life was simply family helping family. They believed that my draining my savings to ensure their comfort was the natural role of an older brother, son, or uncle. But I finally grasped a truth they never had to consider. They didn't need me. They needed what I provided. And now they no longer had it. For the first time, they would have to navigate life on their own. And I intended to simply observe. Within 48 hours, the fissures began to appear. Luke cracked first. The next morning, he texted, feigning normalcy. "Yo, can you spot me $150 until Friday?" As if our silence since my car crash hadn't happened. I didn't reply. 5 minutes later, another text. "Okay, seriously, did I do something? Just let me know, man." Still, silence from my end. By that evening, the first true attempt at guilt-tripping arrived. Aaron sent a group text. "Hey, we need to talk. This family's falling apart." As if I was the failing glue. As if their world shattered because I chose not to speak. Then Michelle called, leaving a voicemail. Her tone was unnervingly calm, almost rehearsed. She claimed not to know what was happening, but hoped I knew how much everyone loves me. She concluded, "We're all stressed right now. Just call us. We'll figure it out like always." That last phrase, "like always," was the trigger. Yes, we always figured it out. But we always meant me. I figured it out when Dad's business nearly collapsed, taking a second job to cover their mortgage. I figured it out when Erin totaled her car and needed a replacement for school. I figured it out when Michelle coveted a study abroad opportunity she couldn't afford. I was perpetually the solution, never just the person, the brother, or the son. That week, everything continued to unravel. 2 days later, my mom sent a lengthy message loaded with passive-aggressive remarks. "I don't know why you're punishing us, and this isn't how families treat each other." No mention of the accident, no acknowledgement of my hospital stay, just her frustration that I was changing. Then, the financial repercussions became undeniable. Michelle's car payment bounced. She texted me screenshots of the overdue notice, claiming a mistake with the automatic transfer. I ignored her. Erin, instead of texting, emailed me, pleading for me to reinstate her loan payment just for this month. She presented it as temporary as it always was. Next, my dad called 3 times consecutively, leaving a voicemail that wasn't angry or even bewildered, but simply exhausted. He stated the mortgage payment hadn't gone through, and if something had changed, I should have been man enough to say so. Man enough. He wanted a conversation. But where was that conversation 4 days prior, when I was bleeding in a trauma ward? That's when I finally knew they weren't sorry. They weren't contacting me because they understood their actions. They were reaching out because their comfortable lives had been disrupted. It wasn't me they missed. It was the version of me that always said yes. Soon, unfamiliar numbers began calling my phone. Initially, I dismissed them as spam until I realized Erin had given my number to a classmate, hoping they'd talk some sense into me. Michelle had her friend message me on Instagram, claiming I was hurting everyone. Luke posted a cryptic story about how some people only show their true colors when they stop needing you. It was bizarre, surreal, as if they had collectively decided I was flawed simply for ceasing to play my part. Then my grandmother called again. She asked about my recovery, offering a pot of soup from her freezer if I wanted it. Never once did she mention money or the family drama. She simply wanted to know if I needed anything. Uncle Keith did the same, sending a prepaid grocery delivery and urging me to rest. The contrast was stark, almost blinding, and that's when a new feeling emerged within me. Not just anger, but power. For the first time, I wasn't being used or manipulated. I was in complete control of who I allowed into my life, who had access to me. One by one, those doors were closing. My family's panic was just starting, and I was far from finished. By week's end, I'd stopped counting the missed calls. They weren't diminishing, they were multiplying. Michelle called 10 times one morning. Erin emailed again, this time copying our dad. Luke tried tagging me in an old Facebook photo with a caption, "Family sticks together, even when it's hard." It felt like they were all trying to provoke any reaction from me. I gave them none. Instead, I turned my attention to something they hadn't yet recalled, the family business. For years, I had quietly managed it behind the scenes. My dad founded the mid-sized remodeling company, but it stayed solvent because I meticulously maintained the books, negotiated supplier contracts, and navigated all licensing and legal complexities. My parents handled client-facing duties, but without me, the entire operation was a house of cards, sustained by sheer habit and outdated trust. I built the structure. I kept it profitable, and I owned the LLC, quietly transferred to me 5 years prior when my dad, unable to secure a bank loan, needed a personal one. They never bothered to read the fine print. I never imagined I'd use that leverage. I'd kept things running because I wanted them to succeed, because I genuinely believed we were a team. But after the accident, after their silence, their selfishness, and the flood of entitled messages, it was time for a change. I made no public announcement, called no meeting. I simply logged into the back-end systems, paused the company's accounts payable, revoked admin access for every family member, and updated the website with a new message. Operations paused under restructure. Then I emailed all suppliers, the electricians, drywall installers, cabinet wholesalers, informing them that payments would resume shortly under a new framework. I was professional, composed, even cold. I knew the fallout would be swift. The very next afternoon, my dad called 7 times. Then my mom, her voicemail this time emotional and panicked, not angry, reported that the crew arrived for a project that morning but couldn't access client files. A supplier had called about a payment hold. She ended with, "What's happening? Please, this isn't like you." But it was exactly like me. The me they consistently underestimated. 2 hours later, an unexpected call came from my cousin Kyle. We hadn't spoken in nearly a year. He was always the quiet type at family gatherings, never involving himself in disputes. He said, "Hey, I know things are messy right now, but good for you. Seriously, I saw what they did after your crash. They knew, and they left anyway." I asked how he knew. His revelation was startling. Luke had posted a story en route to the cabin, a car clip where Aaron explicitly stated, "Well, he's in the hospital. What are we going to do? Sit around and cry," followed by laughter. Kyle saw it before it was deleted, as did a few others in the extended family. It wasn't just neglect. They mocked my situation. That detail struck me differently. I pondered it for a long time. I had thought their absence was mere oversight. It was far worse. It was outright dismissal. The following morning, I finalized the transformation. The company would persist, but without them. I filed paperwork to update the official address, froze all payroll access except my own, and scheduled a meeting with a small, trusted crew, a few loyal individuals who'd stayed even through lean seasons. I offered them new, improved contracts, the kind I once reserved for my family. My parents and siblings could now fend for themselves. Later that evening, Luke sent another message. "You're overreacting. You're going to burn the whole family down over one bad weekend." I didn't reply, though I longed to say it wasn't one bad weekend. It was every single one you asked me to carry. And the first time I truly needed you, you abandoned me. They still failed to grasp the gravity of what was unfolding, but they were about to learn. Not because I sought revenge, but because for the first time they would experience what it truly meant to stand or fall on their own. The repercussions were swift, yet surprisingly quiet, a gradual unraveling that grew more chaotic by the hour. I hadn't intended to check on them, but updates continuously reached me. Contractors I'd collaborated with for years forwarded frantic messages from my dad. His tone swung wildly, polite one moment, threatening the next. He demanded supplier access, questioned frozen accounts, and claimed glitches. Some contractors simply laughed, sending me screenshots. One responded, "Didn't know your old man was such a talker. Thought you handled all the real stuff." He was right. Luke, predictably, chose a different approach. He began posting vague story updates. One depicted the company van at the driveway's edge, captioned, "When you give your whole life to something just to get blindsided." As if I hadn't maintained his employment through at least 5 of his burnout career phases. His last job before the family business lasted 6 weeks, and I'd secured that for him too. Then Erin messaged me again. She tried a softer tactic, acknowledging things were weird but hoping I could front her tuition just one last time. She promised to speak with Mom, claiming everyone was ready to apologize. She even added, "We were just overwhelmed during the trip. No one knew how serious your crash was." I didn't reply because I had seen her say it on video. I hadn't revealed that I'd watched the clip Kyle mentioned, the one Luke briefly posted during their drive, where Aaron openly laughed, saying, "Well, he's in the hospital. What are we going to do? Sit around and cry?" I had a screen recording, copied by someone else, which circulated briefly in our extended family chat before being deleted. They joked, they mocked, then they simply drove off. I said nothing about it, but it lingered in my thoughts with every new message, feigning concern. Then, something wholly unexpected occurred. My mom appeared, alone. No call ahead, just a buzz at my building's intercom around 8 p.m. I watched her on the security feed. She stood there holding a tin of food and a soft grocery bag, likely packed with freezer meals. Her posture reminded me of parent-teacher conferences. Quiet, uncertain of the reception she'd receive. I considered not answering. I was exhausted, my ribs still ached, but curiosity prevailed. I buzzed her in. She said nothing immediately, simply placing the bag on the counter as she had countless times before. Then she spoke. I didn't come to talk you into anything. I just didn't want your freezer to be empty. We stood in silence. Finally, she asked, "Are you going to leave us behind for good?" I replied, I already did. You just didn't notice. She didn't cry, didn't argue. She merely nodded slowly, as if she'd anticipated that answer but had hoped for a different one. Then she left, and for a fleeting moment, I actually thought that might be the conclusion. But it wasn't. 3 days later, a letter arrived. Not an email, but a tangible envelope with my name, handwritten on the front. It was from my grandmother. Inside, a simple note read, "You've done the right thing, even if it feels heavy. I've been watching this for years. I knew it would come to this eventually. Just don't forget to leave space for peace when you're ready." Taped to the bottom was a folded check for $3,100, the exact amount they'd requested for the cabin weekend. The check wasn't an act of guilt, nor was it even a direct message. It was simply her way of conveying, you don't owe them. They owe you, and I know which side I'm on. I never cashed it, I still haven't, but I kept it because for the first time in years, I truly wasn't alone, and that meant more than anything. By the third week, the incessant noise ceased. The daily texts, the missed calls, the frantic voicemails, the half-hearted apologies, they all simply vanished. Initially, I suspected it was a temporary lull, one of those guilt-induced silences preceding a new wave of manipulation. But it wasn't. It was surrender. They finally understood. I wasn't returning. There was no scenario where I'd revert to my old position within the family structure. No more fixer, no more backup plan, no more unpaid emotional labor disguised as love. Whatever image they held of me, the steady one, the helper, the guy who always appeared when needed, it was gone. Because when I needed them, they were absent. The company, however, continued. It was smaller, leaner, healthier. I retained only the crew members who demonstrated dedication, showed up reliably, and didn't seek shortcuts. It was a slower start, but more authentic. I delegated field operations to 2 trusted individuals, focusing instead on strategy and finance, the aspects I genuinely enjoyed. I began receiving consultation offers from other firms, starting to build something for myself, not for the family, but solely for me. I issued no grand announcement. I didn't destroy their lives or send a dramatic message. I simply disconnected. Luke ultimately found work on the night shift at a fulfillment center near the freeway. He confided in one of my former drywall guys that it was merely a temporary placeholder. But I knew the truth. That was his job now. No more backdoor handouts, no company van, no undeclared pay, just reality. Erin withdrew from grad school, posting on social media about needing a mental health break. Her former professor contacted me for a recommendation. Unaware of the situation, I never replied. Michelle quietly sold her car and relocated back with my parents. They maintained the pretense that it was temporary, like so many other things, the kind of temporary that inevitably stretches into a year. My mom tried one last time, a text around 9 p.m. on a Sunday night. She claimed she'd been thinking about everything, mentioned it felt strange not hearing from me, noted that family dinners weren't the same, and asked if I'd consider dropping by one day soon. I stared at the message for a long time, not out of temptation, but because for the first time I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a profound stillness I hadn't experienced in years. It was like standing outside a house I once inhabited, a place that never truly felt like home, and realizing I didn't miss it. I never really had. I didn't answer. The following day, I purchased a plane ticket to Oregon, a place I'd always yearned to visit but never had time for. I rented a solitary cabin and spent a week immersed in trees, fog, and absolute silence. No favors, no obligations, no one requesting anything. For the first time, I truly understood what it meant to exist solely for myself. Not as a support system, not as a personal bank, but simply as me. I still communicate with my grandmother and visit Uncle Keith occasionally. They never mention the family estrangement. They don't need to. They witnessed it unfold in slow motion over the years, just as I did. My grandmother continues to send cards, sometimes with notes, sometimes with checks she knows I won't cash. Just meaningful gestures. That is what genuine love looks like. People often say family is everything, but they rarely discuss what happens when your family becomes your greatest impediment. When love is conditional, when loyalty is a one-way street. I had to experience a literal crash to finally perceive it. I'm no longer angry. I'm not awaiting apologies. I'm not hoping for change. They have their lives, I have mine. The crucial difference is that I built mine on truth and peace.